Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got a set of sources you sent over, news reports, briefings, all from early June 2025. They're focused on a really sad event on the Isle of Wight.
That's right, a specific beauty spot, actually. And we're going to unpack what these initial reports tell us about a car that went off a cliff there.
Exactly. Our goal here is to take these different bits of information, the news articles, the official lines, and just piece together what was known right then. So understanding the facts as they were reported, the immediate response, that kind of thing.
Getting that clear picture from the sources available at the time.
Okay, let's dive in then. We've got this headline event, a car plunging off a cliff near the Needles at Alum Bay. Very dramatic, very tragic. But what do the sources tell us about the core facts, the what and the where?
Well, yeah, the core fact jumps out immediately from all the reporting. A car went off a cliff. It was near the Needles, specifically at Alum Bay on the Isle of Wight. And the sources are pretty consistent on the location off Alum Bay New Road, which, Alum Bay, famous for the colored sands, the Needles rocks. It's a well-known spot.
Right, it sets a scene. And the drop itself, the height, I remember reading it was quite significant.
It really was. The sources consistently put it at approximately 300 feet.
300 feet.
Yeah, which is about 91 meters. That's a huge fall. And the reports say the car went directly into the sea below.
Wow, okay. Just the physics of that, the location. You can imagine it triggering a massive emergency response. But before we get to the response teams, let's just nail down the timing. When exactly did the sources say this happened?
Okay, so the reports placed it on Friday evening. That's June 6, 2025. The police statement, which is quoted a lot, says they were alerted pretty quickly, got the call at 7:21 p.m.
7:21 p.m.
Yeah, and some reports even suggest the incident itself might have been slightly later, maybe around 19.4, so 7:4 p.m.
Okay. Late Friday evening, light probably starting to fade then, at a spot that gets visitors, even if maybe that specific road is quieter. And the most difficult part, the human cost. What do the sources confirm there?
Yeah, this is obviously the most critical and just deeply sad part, and it's confirmed across all the sources. 2 people died.
2 people?
Yes. The reports are very clear. Both individuals were pronounced dead right there at the foot of the cliff.
Just awful. Do the sources give any more information about who they were, any identifying details?
The reports are quite careful on this, as you'd expect. They make it clear that at the time of reporting, so in those first few days, formal identification hadn't happened yet.
Okay.
The standard procedure, of course.
Uh-huh.
But importantly, they do state that the next of kin had been notified by the police.
Right. So the families were aware.
Exactly. But the police hadn't released details like ages, sexes, or, how the 2 individuals were connected.
Yeah.
That information was kept back, which is normal in these early stages.
Understood. So knowing the context, 300-foot drop, car into the sea, the emergency response must have been huge. What kind of picture do the sources paint?
Oh, absolutely. They describe a very, very substantial response, clearly treated as a major incident right from the start. The reports list quite a few agencies. You've got the police, obviously Hampshire and Isle of Wight police, then HM Coastguard.
The Coastguard, right.
And specifically, they mentioned the search and rescue helicopter, Rescue 175, was involved, plus the Yarmouth RNLI lifeboat, and also Coast Guard rescue teams on the ground from the Needles and Ventnor stations.
So air, sea, and land assets from the Coast Guard and RNLI.
Exactly. And add to that the Fire Service Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue and the ambulance service.
Ambulance too?
Yes,
Yeah.
the Isle of Wight ambulance service, including an air ambulance, which apparently landed in Yarmouth nearby, and critical care paramedics. It was a big coordinated effort.
Wow. That level of coordination, police, Coast Guard helicopter, lifeboat, fire crews, paramedics, air ambulance, it really speaks to the seriousness and the difficulty of the location. Did the reports mention specific rescue or recovery attempts?
Yes. One source, Island Echo, had some specific detail on that. It reported that a male was recovered from the water.
Okay.
And it described how complex that was involved. A winchman being lowered from the helicopter, working with an RNLI volunteer from the lifeboat. The report also mentioned that CPR was attempted on shore.
Right.
It gives you a sense of the immediate, really difficult work the rescuers faced right at the cliff base in the water. And what's quite striking is thinking about that coordination. All these specialized teams, air, sea, shore, medical, coming together in one very challenging spot. It really highlights the complexity of responding in these kinds of remote coastal areas.
Definitely. Okay, so we have the event, the tragic outcome, the huge response. The next big question, obviously, is why? What do the sources say about how the car actually went off the road?
Yeah, the crucial why. On that, the sources are very consistent.
Hmm.
The cause was not known at the time they were published.
Not known. Okay.
They all emphasized that investigations were ongoing. Police were actively working to figure out the circumstances.
And where were those investigations focused? I think their reports mentioned police activity away from Alum Bay itself.
They did, yes. And this is an interesting detail about the process. The sources mentioned police were making inquiries specifically on behalf of the coroner. And these inquiries were happening at a property over in Cowes on a street called Arctic Road.
Cowes. That's quite a distance from Alum Bay.
It is. Some reports noted officers were there as early as Saturday morning, the day after. So the fact they were focusing on an address away from the scene suggests, that investigators were looking for context. Information about the individuals, perhaps, or the events leading up to it. It shows the investigation wasn't just about the crash site itself.
That's a key point. The investigation started broad very quickly. Now, the sources also mentioned something specific the police had not confirmed, didn't they? Something that might have been speculated about.
Yes, exactly. And this is important for understanding how information is managed. Several sources explicitly stated police had not confirmed if they were treating it as a murder-suicide or, any other specific scenario like that.
Right. They made a point of saying what wasn't confirmed.
Precisely. It's framed as what police haven't established rather than saying it's definitely a line of inquiry. It often happens in sensitive cases. Authorities clarify what's not confirmed yet, partly to manage speculation. We're just reporting what the sources said police stated or didn't state.
Okay, understood. So moving beyond the incident itself and the investigation, how did this affect the actual area? Alum Bay, the Needles, it's a big visitor destination.
Yeah, there were immediate impacts, though temporary. The sources say that during the emergency response, access was restricted. So the beach itself, below the cliffs, was closed off. An observation tower nearby, and the Needles Battery of the Old Fort, which is a National Trust place, those were also inaccessible for a time.
And the main attraction there?
The Needles landmark attraction, yeah. That was also closed temporarily by the police while they were working.
But things have reopened since.
Yes. The later reports from Sunday and Monday confirmed that the area was back open, access restored.
Okay. And wasn't there something else happening on the Isle of Wight that weekend? A good event.
That's right, yeah. Good point. The sources mentioned this happened during the weekend of the Round the Island race.
Ah, the big yacht race.
Exactly. Huge event, hundreds of boats, and the course does pass relatively close to Alum Bay. The reports noted the race still went ahead, despite the tragedy unfolding nearby. Kind of a stark contrast, an isolated incident happening amidst this major planned event.
Yeah, definitely. Now, one of the sources we looked at, the Island Echo article, it had a comment section underneath. Obviously, that's not official info, but sometimes those comments give you a sense of local feeling or knowledge. What did you pick up from there?
That's an interesting angle, yeah. And you're right, we need to be clear. These are public comments from readers, not official findings. They reflect personal views, maybe some local knowledge, but they do show, first off, a lot of sadness and sympathy for the families. That's very clear and totally understandable.
Of course.
But beyond that, quite a few commentators started talking about this specific road, Alum Bay New Road.
Ah, the actual road where it happened? What were they saying?
Well, people who seem to know the area described it as narrow, an access road. Some said it's often restricted, maybe mainly for the buses that go down to the Needles attraction, or perhaps you need special permission to drive a car down there at the battery.
Okay, so local knowledge about access restrictions.
Right. And this has led into a bit of an online debate, in the comment section reported the article. People discussing driving on island roads generally, maybe comparing it to mainland driving, the difficulties, safety concerns on certain routes.
So speculation based on local experience of the roads?
Exactly. Again, it's purely what was reported from those comments. Local chatter, people trying to make sense of it, perhaps thinking about potential factors based on their knowledge of the place. It's completely separate from the official investigation, which was still trying to determine the actual cause. But it shows how that local context immediately becomes part of the conversation around an event like this.
It is fascinating, isn't it, how you get the official reports, the response details, and then these sort of community-level reactions and discussions layered on top. So if we bring all this together now, what does this deep dive into these initial sources really tell us about the Alum Bay incident in those first few days?
Well, when you sift through these different reports, you really do get a layered picture of the known facts as they came out. You see the core event, car off that 300-foot cliff, Friday evening. You see the scale of the emergency response. Huge, multi-agency, reflecting the severity and the location.
Mm-hmm.
You see the tragic confirmation by Sunday of 2 deaths handled carefully by the authorities regarding identification and notifying family. And you see the investigation starting immediately, spreading beyond the crash site with those inquiries and cows.
Right.
So this deep dive, it gives you more than just the headline. You see the process, the crisis response, the careful information release, the early investigation steps, and even that glimpse of how the local community starts to process it.
It's a really sobering picture. A tragic event at Alum Bay, 2 lives lost, this massive emergency effort, and an investigation just beginning its work to understand exactly what happened.
And maybe something for you, the listener, to think about is how one sudden, awful event like this really becomes a focal point. It touches so many systems, doesn't it? Emergency services coordinating, police investigations, coronial procedures, the impact on local attractions, even just community conversations online and offline. Piecing together these different reports like we've tried to do, it just gives you a much fuller sense, even though it's still developing, of everything that happens around such an incident.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the sources covering the Alum Bay incident.